Welcome to This Week in Health IT Influence, where we discuss the influence of technology on health with the people who are making it happen. Today we get very practical with Brian Lancaster, VP of IT at Nebraska Medicine. My name is Bill Russell, Healthcare CIO coach and creator of This Week in Health IT, a set of podcast videos and collaboration events dedicated to developing the next generation of health leaders. This episode is sponsored by Health Lyrics. I coach health leaders on all things health IT. Coaching was instrumental in my success, and it is the focus of my work at Health Lyrics. I coach CEOs of health systems, CIOs, CTOs, startups as well. If you want to elevate your game in 2020, visit healthlyrics.com to schedule your free consultation. As I said, today we're joined by Brian Lancaster with Nebraska Medicine. Good morning, Brian. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Wow, I was just commenting earlier on you have one of those really cool, hip kind of offices you guys have going on there.
Yeah, we really went all in on kind of an open space concept, really first geared towards we're running out of space, but it also has helped us with collaboration and communication, things like that.
It's interesting when you take an IT organization into that environment, how have you found they react? I'll tell you my story after I hear your story, because my story's not a good one.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. We were all over the place, from people who were excited, people who really didn't care. They'd come do the work, whichever environment they had, and then also people that were really concerned. And unfortunately, I think the people who were really concerned were the most vocal. So we did a lot of storming, norming, and forming. So meaning we had open sessions where they could talk about their concerns, and everything from, wow, I'm gonna have to talk to people I don't like, which is probably something we need to work on regardless of the space, as well as to stinky food and stuff like that. So we had some concerns up front. We also coupled the space with a pretty aggressive work from home policy. So kind of adopting the mentality of work is what you do, not where you go. So we really have this interesting kind of outcome in terms of people who need heads down time can go work from home if their environment is conducive to that, can work at another university location for heads down time. We also created kind of focused areas for heads down time, and then open areas really centered around teams. And after the implementation, I think we've had great results, and it's something that the rest of our organization is looking to adopt for basic reasons around just run out of space.
Yeah, I'll tell you, as a CIO, the thing that I got in the most trouble for was always moving too fast and not laying the foundation. And so I come into healthcare and I noticed that the first thing you notice, it just sort of cracks you up. We have this 4-story building for IT, and all the offices are on the outside of the building. So, the cubicles are on the inside with no light, and then all the, anyone with a title of director or above has taken all the light away from the staff members. And I thought, man, this is horrible. This, clearly that we could do better. So we took one of the floors, we took everything out. I mean, completely gutted it, opened it up. And I thought people would be clamoring to get to that space. It's change. People just naturally struggle with change, and all the things you sort of talked about. It's like, I've never worked in an open environment. How does this, how do I get work done? Do I put headphones on? Is it rude to have, I mean, we have to walk people through it before you just throw them into it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And we found it's really an individual choice. What works for me may not work for you. So how do we allow for people to find out, maybe the open space or working from home doesn't work, so we can pull them in and give them appropriate space. So we've been learning that as well. Yeah, but change is always the, I like you, I love change, and I move probably faster than I should. I think most people just get concerned with change. We had some individuals who were coming to the same cubicle for 40 years, and they thought that cubicle was theirs. And now they see that it's what they do is so much more than that space. So, but it takes time.
Well, I want to get nerdy on this episode with you. We had a prior call, but before we do that, Brian, tell us a little bit about Nebraska Medicine and a little bit about your role.
Yeah, so we're located in Omaha, Nebraska, and basically we support the surrounding region with our 2 hospitals and 40 clinics. So roughly at 800 beds or so, $1.8 billion in revenue from an active health system. So we're certainly not the largest organization, but Nebraska Medicine is really the clinical enterprise. So with our research and educational partner, the University of Nebraska Medical Center, we share a mission which I think is pretty exciting and pretty inspiring. We aspire to lead the world in transforming lives to create a healthy future for all individuals through our premier education, innovative research, and the quality of care we provide. So we're really known for quaternary care, so specialty care. And right now we are getting some national attention for the coronavirus. So we have one of the largest biocontainment units in the country. And we are basically just received the patients coming in from the cruise ship. So we are seeing to that kind of quaternary care, the infectious disease, transplant, cancer, et cetera, those types of things. My role is I have IT responsibilities for both the clinical enterprise and the academic enterprise. So it's an interesting role because I get to go from really 3 different businesses, from clinical, research, and educational.
Yeah, that is a fun role. I love talking to, here's what I found. I do talk to some of the larger health systems, and they, they're pushing the envelope in a lot of different areas and whatnot, but I like talking to people at your size organization. You tend to be a little bit more practical, a little bit more pragmatic. I used to say that I would go to at my health system, I would go to the data center, and my swipe key didn't work at the data center. They wouldn't let me in without an escort as the CIO. But as we get to certain size health systems, you have to be more in the weeds with a lot of this stuff. Clearly, you can't be in the weeds with everything, but I like that. And the other thing I found is there's just a lot of $1 billion to $3 billion health systems out there that share a lot of the same problems. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I hope we get a little nerdy on this. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. So we met a while back, but what happened is I was sitting in an executive briefing with VMware, and they showcased a solution that was so cool that I asked if I could talk to the system that was doing the work, and they put me in touch with you, which was awesome. It was essentially, and this is the direction I want to go. What's changing in the data center? What's changing in how we deliver the services to the desktop? What's changing in the way that we look at security? And I was sitting in this executive briefing, and they showed me how, I guess it was you guys, so how you were closing down the attack surface of the ports of legacy applications and even the EHR that we oftentimes don't even think about, but they're very real. And I looked at that solution. I said, I want my listeners to hear about that work. So can you give us a little background on that?
Yeah, so great question. So really this gets into our story around virtualization. And like any organization, we started with compute and server virtualization. And actually we had a large project in 2016 to move from one data center to a brand new data center. And one of our intents of that project was really to adopt as many automation or virtualization techniques as possible. And really as part of that effort, we went from a handful of virtualization to roughly about 70% server virtualization, which made that move a lot easier. Then in 2017, we really looked at, okay, what's our next kind of evolution or next step on our virtualization data center automation journey? And it really got into network virtualization. And if you're not familiar with network virtualization, it's really a close analogy to the virtual machine, where you have a virtual network that's in essence a software container that presents logical network components. So logical switches, routers, firewalls, load balancers, VPNs, all within that connected workload. So it's using software to deliver the networking resources. They're programmatically created, provisioned, managed, and it really creates a lot of opportunities. One of those opportunities is referred to as microsegmentation, but there are other use cases too. So I'll talk about microsegmentation a bit, but in my opinion, network virtualization is a key component to having a cloud strategy. Why is that? Because it also supports stretch layer 2. So in essence, I can take a workload and move it from one data center to the next without having to re-IP it. And if you've ever done this type of work, you realize having to try to manage all this stuff gets very complex between two on-prem data centers. Why this ties to a cloud strategy is if I can virtualize all that and use software to manage it, and I can do stretch layer 2, I can not only move it from one of my data centers to another data center, but I can also move it to Azure or AWS or your cloud provider as you see fit. And to me, that creates elasticity, so I don't have to get tied to the terms of AWS or Azure if I consume those from a native perspective. So hopefully that concept makes sense. If you get the concept, I think you can start to see how it could help with microsegmentation, which I'll get into in a bit, but I'll pause and let you know if that made sense or not.
Yeah, no, that really makes sense. You know, we talk a lot about vendor lock-in with regard to cloud strategies. And we talk about, you know, one of the primary things you're trying to get from a cloud strategy is agility, right? The ability to move out, do something, move it back, or to move away from the old SunGuard model of for disaster recovery and business continuity of buying all these resources that I don't know if you remember the SunGuard model, but you used to pay every month for these resources, and they didn't even guarantee that they would be available in emergency.
Yes.
Which always made me scratch my head. But that agility is really what you're paying for, the ability to move things around. And the virtual network is I mean, to not re-IP. Back when I was doing this, we still had to re-IP a lot of stuff. And so over the last 4 years, this has really moved forward pretty much since I stopped playing with it.
Yeah, I mean, if you get into networking, it's really complicated to try to track the flow from an application server to a web server to a database server, and I'll do that for 8,000 different systems. So if you're not using software, you're bound to have inefficient processes and create error, and error results in downtime. So with that backdrop, if you want, we can go into microsegmentation.
Absolutely.
So microsegmentation basically was always a thing, right? So meaning, how do I take a system and make sure I only have enough access to that system as possible? You could do that on a manual basis. And in fact, I was just having an argument with one of our computer scientist faculty members who still teaches a lab today on how to build a microsegmented system manually. And I was telling them that doesn't make any sense. Anyone who would do that would use software to do that. So you should be teaching network virtualization, because in essence, that manual process just wasn't operational feasible, because you would have to look at each packet that leaves the virtual machine, transverse the network, evaluate it, enforce it to make sure you have a choke point within the firewall. And you're not going to be able to do that at scale. So it really wasn't feasible. So now with network virtualization and the combination of hypervisor-based and kernel distribution firewalling, platform-based automation, we can segment it using software, using virtualization. And really, to do it, you have to have detailed network visibility and really understand what these packets are doing. And to be honest with you, we didn't really understand that. And again, that has clear impact to productivity. It also has a huge info security issue. So we don't know what our systems are connecting to, how they're using that data. We could be exposed for a threat. It also simplifies underlying physical networks, meaning now we know exactly the things that are connected to our Epic environment. Now we can make sure we lock down everything else. And it's also really designed for automation. So how do I take a new system, make sure I understand what it connects to, and automatically deploy the network components for it? And then obviously it's implied the info security benefits of this, but forensics, we have richer context, better troubleshooting. In essence, we know this port has never been pinged before. Now we know that there's activities and volume of activities, we can turn it off or investigate it.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. So I'm going to dig a little deeper here. I mean, the two things I loved about this were the visibility and the automation, and you know, that the argument, as you say, with the professor, that, you know, that is the way that a lot of health systems are still doing this. They're still manually setting up all this networking, and they're still manually setting up systems as well, and it doesn't really scale. And so when you become, you know, when you go to add another health system or acquire a health system or grow in that way, now all of a sudden that really comes to light, because now you're trying to do those manual processes across maybe even double the size, as we're seeing in some of the mergers in Chicago and in other places. So there's the automation part, and I really want to dig into that further. But before we get there, I want to talk about visibility. So one of the things that happens is you do start to see all the ports, right? You start to see all the traffic that's coming into your EHR and all the requests and all the things that are going on, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, why are all those ports open? Or why are we communicating with all these different things? And you're able to really, from a software standpoint, create those choke points and say, no, only this information through these ports gets to my critical systems. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so really the first task of our project was really understanding the sequence of the packets and making sure that packet belonged to a certain network session between two endpoints. And I think when we started the project, we were working with a technology that was acquired by VMware. So it was called Arkin, now it's vRealize Operations. It allows you to visualize all the sessions and the packets. So we really have a clear understanding of our environment. And then basically, when we understand it, we basically mapped our port flows across all protocols and services, providing kind of that clarity, if you will. And then we quickly saw that, you know, we had way too many open ports, and then we kind of locked it down. Where we were, and this was in 2017, and they've added some additional features, which I think everyone will benefit from. But we basically had to still kind of turn off ports ourselves. And unfortunately, as part of our lessons learned, if you will, we turned off some ports that impacted a small department, but still impacted the department because they couldn't connect to that resource. And obviously, we fixed that. But that first part was kind of doing the port flow, and then kind of mapping that back to what we could activate or deactivate.
Yeah. So let's talk about automation a little bit. You know, so one of the things we ended up doing in our cloud journey was we standardized our builds. We looked at AWS and we said, you know, for the entire world, they're essentially saying, hey, you can buy this many images. And we said, well, if they could do that for the world, we could probably get below our 120 images that we have within our health system. And we narrowed it down to 5. So we, you know, so we moved to 5 images. And then my team was so happy the day they came in and said, hey, look, through an Echo device, we can now provision servers in the health system. Now it was just a test, and they were just sort of showing it off. But the reason I talk about that is the level of automation. I don't think the level of automation that's possible, people are taking advantage of or even realize is out there. I mean, we really can program that whole stack at this point and automate a ton of things.
Yeah, so absolutely. So part of this project, we created a set of standardized templates for our electronic medical record for other organizations to use. So you take the template and kind of give you a good start for what type of networking should be in existence for those environments. And then also they have proactive monitoring tools. Now, the current version of the system has basically added AI to it, where you can basically say, okay, I'm gonna monitor your traffic for a period of time. Then I'm gonna basically, you know, give you a report that says you should turn on or off these ports. so it's basically more self-guided. Obviously, with anything that's AI-based, like you wouldn't let the car just automatically drive you without having some control over it. Right now, you basically still get the report, but it's making a suggestion. Versus where we were in 2017, we basically had to kind of look at the reports ourselves, make the recommendation, and as I shared, we did have a small impact when we disabled some of the ports. Now we can actually see that real time, how the AI makes the suggestions of what should be turned on and off, and then basically accept those rules.
How are you guys thinking about your cloud strategy? I mean, you're not thinking of an all-in cloud strategy, like we're getting out of the data center business, we're moving it all to the cloud, or is that how you're thinking about it?
So I would love to get out of the data center business, but unfortunately, with some of the systems I support, that's impossible, right? Because a lot of those systems are still physical. Cache, Citrix, a lot of physical parts to those systems. So from a data or a cloud strategy or a data center strategy, I'm really trying to reduce my footprints, and first and foremost is adopt as much software as a service as I can. So we were moving from Lawson to Workday and things like that. So that helps, but that doesn't really get me out of the data center business. So the next piece of it is looking at, okay, how do I continue to make sure I'm cloud ready? And first and foremost, that gets into be fully virtualized and employ cloud techniques to my current environment, which is also referred to as private cloud. So now if I have a private cloud environment, I'm kind of preparing for the ability to move workloads to the cloud if that becomes feasible. And that's a big component. So cloud first, where cloud's not available, then virtualization. And then what I would love to get to the point is providing my cloud engineering team one pane of glass that they could manage workloads across all data centers. So it could be my private cloud as well as a public cloud. And I think when I can enable that, I have a true cloud strategy, because I don't personally feel adopting software as a service as a cloud strategy, because I still have a data center. And that gets into ensuring that as I start to move workloads to the cloud, then I can basically have the same hypervisor, the same technology that I'm using for compute, network, and storage virtualization available to me and by my cloud providers. And that's where we're at now. So it's still an emerging strategy, because really the only cloud we're consuming is from software as a service vendors. We do some bursting for our researchers, and we also do some cloud environments for a kind of a development environment, a non-production testing environment. But again, that's a trivial amount of our workloads.
How are you thinking about DR? So your disaster, Nebraska. So your disaster is tornadoes. Do you have other disasters that you have to consider?
The biggest disaster of recent time was a flood. So I don't know, this time last year we were under an immense amount of flooding that really impacted the region, if not just the state. Tornadoes, floods. But then I think where we do our business continuity drills anymore, it's all cyber. So I think cyber would be a piece of the disaster as well. But physical disasters would be tornadoes and floods.
So is cloud a part of that strategy, or are you thinking?
So not really at this point, because we run active. And then I haven't seen a DR solution per se that will allow me to run, especially from an ethic perspective, active, instead of a true DR strategy of I want to have a static environment where I can, have a period of time where I go recover that information.
That's interesting. I mean, active, you're talking about fantastic RTO, RPO times, but active is generally considered pretty expensive to stand up and maintain. So that's why systems of your size generally don't have that in place. But you guys are, I guess, fortunate enough to have that.
Yeah, we are fortunate, and I inherited that strategy from my predecessor, which I think he made all the right technical decisions and really put us in a good spot. And that was also when we moved from our data center in 2016 to a brand new data center. That was also the same strategy to move to an active environment. So yeah, so it's not, you don't do, well, I don't think you do cloud to do cost containment, and you certainly don't do active for cost containment. It's really about making sure the business doesn't get impacted.
Yeah, and you don't go through that. The the thing I always had to go through is, is this going to be an extended outage, or I mean, you'd have to sit there as a CIO and predict whether to do DR or not, because the move to DR was always um, cumbersome to get there, but it was also cumbersome to get back.
Right.
Well, so an active is sort of sort of nirvana for a CIO. You don't have to sit in that chair and make that decision. It sort of,
Yeah, so it is interesting because we have started exploring is active the right strategy due to the cost aspects, as well as it can be challenging from a cyber perspective. So meaning if I have an infected system and I go and running active, I keep propagating that infected system. So how do I have a clean copy, which then gets into having a longer set of backup systems that are static, which in fact is DR. So we are kind of thinking about is active really the right strategy anymore, due to the cost and due to some of the cyber risks.
well, you haven't let me down. This has been an extremely nerdy conversation. Let me ask you, just a closing question, which is what else is changing in the data center today, or do you think is going to change in the next couple of years in the data center?
So we haven't talked about storage, and so we did after network virtualization 2017. Our next big project was really around storage virtualization, and I think that's been really interesting because we can now predict when storage is running out, and we can basically have systems that allocate additional storage on demand or automatically. So I think that's been promising. The other big thing we've done is we're providing infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, as a self-service to our clinical researchers who are doing really development. That was done mainly because they're in essence running servers and whatnot in an uncontrolled environment. So providing them kind of compute resources on demand has allowed us to address a pretty large cyber event, as well as get alignment with a group that really wasn't ever aligned with IT, which is your research community. Then what the big impact of all this has been on, I think, is the changing role of IT. So if you automate a lot of this work, and I'm sure you've seen some of our ROI, which is in the $33 million per year of virtualizing all this, which gets into, we had over 3 million ports and went down to 500 ports for our electronic medical record environment. You can associate a value with that, but it's also efficiency. Now you've automated storage, networking, and compute. What we used to do from an IT perspective has now changed. We've actually introduced what I call IT architects, which is kind of a hybrid between an enterprise architect and a solution architect who works with the business to understand their problem, but they come back with a kind of an IT approach plan for solving that business problem. And I don't think we would have been able to do that if those individuals were still doing their traditional IT jobs, which is also complex because your best server engineers are probably not your most client facing individuals. So how do we retool people, align people appropriately, things of that nature?
Yeah, actually, you gave me 3 jumping off points, and we have a couple more minutes, so I'm gonna take them if that's okay. So we started hiring full stack people, right? Because they almost have to be full stack at this point, where we used to have a group of people that did storage, then we had a group of people that did networking, then we had a group of people that did servers. and then we had the analysts over here, and we started hiring full stack people towards the end of my tenure as a CIO, because that's the way they needed to understand and see that whole thing. So let's start with single pane environment. Are you pretty close to a single pane environment in terms of being able to see network system storage and cloud from a single pane? How far away from that are we today?
Yeah, so we do have that environment, and it's basically enabled through a VMware product, VMware Cloud Management on AWS. So it basically uses the same infrastructure that we've deployed here. So my hypervisor is the same, and we have some workloads running on AWS, for example, which are the same pane of glass as we have on-prem, if that makes sense.
Even on-prem, are you? So I mean, we had a storage environment, and it had its own set of tools. We had a compute environment; it had its own set of tools. We had a network environment. So we had a Cisco environment. We had whatever. We had a Dell server environment. So we had those tools and the Microsoft tools, and then we had the EMC and those kinds of tools. So we had, I mean, single pane of glass. We had lots of panes of glass. Has that really consolidated for you guys?
Yeah, and that's really when I mentioned vRealize operations. That gives us that insight across everything that we've virtualized. And maybe full transparency, we haven't gotten 100%, so we still have other tools, but 75% or so, we have that in one pane of glass. So we are moving towards that direction as much as we can. But yes.
Yeah, that's huge. Do you guys do any development at all? I mean, you're academic center, you have university, college students there. Is there any middleware or patient engagement stuff? Are you doing any development there?
Yeah, so on the university side, we do a lot of development, and actually we're retooling them to be a DevOps shop, because they were doing Power Builder development with Sybase as the back end, which if you know those technologies, they've basically been end of life for a while. So we're converting those to a SQL Server environment running in Azure, and then also PHP on the front end. So we do mainly on the academic side for some administrative functions like IRB, accounts payable, things of that nature, parking, things like that. On the clinical side, we're pretty early in kind of mobile and web technology. We're doing a digital front door strategy, which is basically consolidating multiple different experiences. So today, if you're a patient of ours, you have at least 3 different mobile or web experiences, and they don't work together. So you have MyChart, you have Find a Physician, and you have a retail pharmacy app from McKesson, and those don't play nice together. So we're basically creating one app that's accessible on Droid or iOS, as well as on the web, and that will give us a launching point to do new experiences. And I think with some really cool things that none of those would really introduce for us, that will provide a really good consumer experience. Like, we're a complex academic medical center with lots of different buildings. It'd be really neat to have an app that would say, hey, where should I park? Park at parking lot B and take door 2. And then when you come back out of your appointment, say, where did I park? And have that voice come in and tell you, oh, you parked in parking lot B, spot 2. So we're working on some of those types of things as well. And that does tie into our cloud infrastructure and trying to get to a true DevOps type of situation.
Yeah. So, man, well, you clearly did not disappoint. And if you're open to it, I reserve the right to call you up at a later time when I get stuck on some technology topic that I want to talk about, because this was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Always happy to help, especially if you want to get nerdy.
Exactly. So is there a way that people can follow you or see some of the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's the best case. I'm not too active on Twitter. So LinkedIn and just Brian Lancaster, UNC Nebraska Medicine, and you should be able to find me.
Fantastic. Thanks again. So special thanks to our channel sponsors, Starbridge Advisors, VMware, Galen Healthcare, Pro Talent Advisors, and HealthErix for choosing to invest in developing the next generation of health leaders. Please come back every Friday for more great interviews with influencers. And don't forget, every Tuesday, we take a look at the news, which is impacting health IT. This show is a production of This Week in Health IT. For more great content, check out the website, thisweekhealth.com, or the YouTube channel. If you want to support the show, best way to do it, refer a peer. Send them an email, tell them you're listening to the show and you're getting stuff out of it, and you're learning stuff and getting really nerdy, geeky stuff out of it. That would be great. Really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.